Hi, folks. This is Dr. Niogi. I'm excited to be with you here for our first lecture. And I decided to start with the topic of sociological imagination. This is one of the key topics in sociology, and it really gives you a sense of what we mean by sociological analysis. And so at the bottom here, I say, what is sociology? And really, sociology is thinking about social issues with a sociological imagination. So I'm going to try and get to the next screen here. Okay, there we go. So when you think of sociological imagination, the term was coined by C. Wright Mills, who's a very famous sociologist. And he tries to point out that essentially we need to be looking at things around us by trying to grasp the history and biography as well as the relationships between the two. He says this is the task as well as the promise of sociology. And the diagram here points out to you the intersections of your individual biography as well as social history. So I decided to share lots of examples with you because it's through examples that this particular concept will become clearer. The first example I chose is obesity, which in the US we do tend to think about as a personal issue. I think it's a perfect example for pointing out that even though we think of obesity as a personal issue, often connected with self-esteem, identity, especially in the fat-shaming culture that we exist in fact, obesity has many social factors. For instance, the CDC points out that over 42% of Americans are obese, right? So something that we imagine as a very personal issue turns out is a social phenomenon. And then you start thinking about the social and cultural factors associated with this. So food becomes a really important part of all our celebrations. I list a lot of those here. It becomes associated with emotions. Comfort food is a term we use. So it's a big part of our culture and our identity. And then when you think about it, there are other important social factors that point out that there are patterns to this obesity. So for instance, you might have heard of the term food deserts, which are neighborhoods where fresh produce, healthy foods are not freely available. The other factor I wanted to point out is very well illustrated in the documentary Food Inc., for those of you who are interested, where you want to ask yourselves as a sociologist, why is it that salads cost more than the cheeseburgers, right? Why does produce cost so much money? And turns out that 85% of our agricultural subsidies go to corn. Hence, you find high fructose corn syrup in everything that we consume. So a lot of this is also by design, and it's really important to pay attention to those social and cultural factors. I want you to pause the video for a minute and just do a free write using some of these questions where I ask you to think about your other examples of personal trouble that have social factors associated with them. How do social structures contribute to social problems? And then how does using a sociological imagination help us examine human behavior? All right, so you're back. We can dig in deeper and look at how we can apply our sociological imagination using these things from our sociological toolkit. So usually we're thinking about the process of socialization that's happening with our family, peer group, or subculture, large social events like 9/11 or even the civil rights movement, social class and social stratification. You can take that to the global level. You can think of other factors like race and ethnicity, gender and sexuality, And of course, sociologists are interested in studying social institutions such as education, religion, family, etc. In fact, this is the graphic that is pointing out to you all these other institutions that have an impact on you as an individual. Beyond these institutions, you also have important cultural movements such as the Black Lives Matter movement that have an important impact on shaping identities. I wanted us to apply this further using an exercise, and the exercise will point out to you the different levels of analysis. I chose my favorite object here. You're free to choose any object of your liking, any everyday object. The first level of analysis here is description, where you would literally ask questions like, how is the object made, right? What are we looking at? In this case, we are looking at a latte that has a heart drawn on the foam above, which probably means a barista made this. And it's in a cup and a saucer, which is different from how most of us drink coffee nowadays, which is to go. So that's the very first level. The next level, you go on to the local analysis. And I have a couple of images here just to show you what the local micro context might be. You're essentially trying to see how is this object consumed, who's able to access it, who can afford it, has it become indispensable in your life, etc. So the first image shows three friends who seem to be nice and relaxed, and they are drinking coffee in to-go cups, casual clothing. And in the second one, where you see a man and a woman in formal attire or work clothes, they're probably taking a break from work, and they are drinking coffee from a cup and a saucer. So kind of two different scenarios. And then you want to be thinking about, what does asking someone out for coffee symbolize, right? Does it carry different meanings in different contexts, and so on. Now we get to the macro level of analysis. We start thinking even deeper to, hey, where did this object come from? What part of the world does this come from? Made, right? Who harvests the coffee? Do these folks get a fair wage? Will they ever be able to afford a cup of latte? And those kinds of questions. And then at the final level, you would do historical analysis, right? And I have the image there that shows you how just the size of coffee has changed from 1940 to what it is today, right? I mean, we know this. We buy coffee from Starbucks and it probably has 1800 calories, right? So you want to think about again how this object has changed over time, and then how you think it will be consumed in the future. And as I said, you can apply these levels of analysis to any object of your choosing, but also things like identities, roles, traditions, institutions, and so on. I wanted to make this really important point that as we are studying and changing the social world through sociological imagination, we must acknowledge the scope of sociological imagination. So this is a skill you can use to help you answer empirical and interpretive questions. Empirical as in grounded, right? Questions that you're trying to answer by collecting data scientifically from the ground, right? Questions that can be answered not through opinion or hearsay, but through data. Interpretive means it involves analysis, your particular interpretation based on evidence and logic. Sociological imagination, however, cannot be used to answer moral questions. For instance, we can answer if God exists or not. Similarly, it cannot be used to answer aesthetic questions. we can't answer if something is inherently beautiful or not, right? At the same time, we can say we can gather evidence about what people in a particular context think of as a god, or what this group of people believes is the criteria for beauty, which, by the way, is so different from one place to another. So, keeping that in mind, social research methods becomes really important to create valid and reliable knowledge, right? So this is the reason we need to use standard measures. We need to go in with the understanding that we take nothing for granted. We have to challenge common sense assumptions, and we have to replicate research that has been done before, triangulate it by using different methods. And then finally, be reflexive as well, because part of being a sociologist is acknowledging that we are also products of a social context. So we are coming to an end of this particular unit on sociological imagination. There are a couple of other sources that I'm hoping you will take a look at. And at the end of that, do a self-assessment where you're thinking of ways in which a social structure has had an impact in your own lives, and then consider the broader impact of that particular structure. For instance, if you think of religion, has that particular structure had any impact on you, even if you think of yourself as a self-professed atheist, right? And then what influence does religion have in larger society? And so once you do that, you'll see that in our next mini unit, when we cover the major sociological paradigms, I will be asking you to connect this analysis on sociological imagination with the unit on the sociological paradigms. And at the end of those two units, you will submit to a discussion post a self-reflection connecting what you did here with sociological imagination and applying one of the paradigms to that. So lots of fun things to learn very soon. I will see you later. Bye.